All right, so there's a lawsuit against the biggies in the state over education.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
So I think I get it. In order to be able to participate better in the democracy, our kids need to be better educated. In order to be better educated, we have to have a commitment. In order to have a commitment, we have to actually have a formal decree that everybody has an equitable right to education. I think I have the essence of what this lawsuit is about, levied against the governor, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, the Commissioner of Education, et al. Greetings. Nice to have you, and thanks for joining us on My State of Mind. We're going to forego the usual checking on things going on, because this conversation may be repeatable. The original air date, what's today? The 6th? Today's the 6th, December 6th? So you may see this a couple of times during our downtimes during the holidays, because I think it's a really important conversation. So, on the lawsuit, earlier this week, I asked the Commissioner of Education what his thoughts were. Do you have a thought about the litigation itself? What can you say about it?
Yeah, so I can't, of course, comment on the litigation itself, but I will say two things. One is the suit makes a link between how well we educate our people and how well our people manages its government and is able to participate in the operation of its government. That is an incredibly powerful, true idea, but it goes back to our founding. When we were founded, the link between the importance of education and the ability, I think the quip is, you got your republic, now keep it. It's on us to make sure that we keep
Forget about the suit itself. Do you think the civics, is your impression that our kids and even their parents get civics?
Yeah.
I don't. I think we're at an all-time low.
Yeah, so there's the pieces of the civics of memorizing these facts or making sure that you vote and your voice is heard. What I'm concerned about is deep, thoughtful, inquisitive people who know how to ask questions, get information, synthesize information, form opinions, form relationships. All of that deep stuff that goes into being a person is related to being well educated, is related to participating in your government. The thing I will say very clearly is I 100% support any effort, and there have been efforts in Rhode Island, for example, around state constitutional amendments, any effort to guarantee the legal protections for kids' access to a high-quality education.
So it's going to be interesting. So, sorry for that cut clip there, but that was the answer to the question that is being driven by our guest. Jennifer Wood is running this show with a few other plaintiffs. She's the executive director for Rhode Island Center for Justice. Welcome. Nice to have you.
Thank you.
I don't know whether I want you to react to what. Yeah, go ahead and react to what the commissioner said. Then we'll regroup and kind of redefine exactly what it is from Jump Street you're trying to get accomplished here.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Sure.
I actually really appreciate the commissioner's comments. I heard his comment earlier in the week when we first filed the suit, actually late last week, and I previously worked for a commissioner of education. I spent almost a decade of my life at the Rhode Island Department of Education as general counsel there. And I have to say that I'm grateful but not surprised if the leading educator in the state didn't understand the connection between preparing young people to participate in our society and in our government. If that person didn't understand the link between education and that task, I would be pretty horrified. But I very much appreciate that the commissioner has several times now stated unequivocally that he supports any effort to not only make sure that that link is being fulfilled, but that we have a clear declaration that it is a right for students to have an adequate education to participate in democracy as adults. Okay. Because we may need some changes either at the state level, constitutionally, and there's been a movement around that in Rhode Island, but we're asserting that under the U.S. Constitution.
Okay, so let's start from Jump Street. Once upon a time in the recent past, you and other lawyers and some students decided that you were going to sue the state of Rhode Island. What you just said was really smart. I think most people are watching are thinking, well, what do you mean? I don't get this. We educate them. Aren't they guaranteed an education? I mean, our taxpayer dollars put them in school. What is she talking about, right? So what is the genesis and the objective of the lawsuits?
I understand the public confusion around this issue. Most of my friends and family, when I talk about this case, say to me, hold on, isn't that already the case? I mean, surely it's so central and fundamental.
That being?
That there is a constitutional right to education in the United States. People assume it is true, and most of the people I talk to are a little shocked to learn that it is not the case, in the sense that no court has declared it. I believe that it's true in the way the Constitution is structured, but we don't have a court ruling that says the United States Constitution protects this. Why are people confused about that? On the one hand, education is one of the only things that is mandatory in this country. The government says you gotta send your kid to school. That's a very unusual relationship.
By statute.
By statute in Rhode Island and in every other state, there's mandatory education through a certain age.
Not a federal statute.
It is not a federal statute. There are other federal laws that protect education rights of individuals with disabilities and special needs. So there has been quite a bit of federal involvement as well at the statutory level. But there's this weird disconnect that actually this is one of the few things that our government in every state says you must do. You have to deliver that kindergarten age child to the school, or show us that you're somehow meaningfully fulfilling that obligation as a parent through enrollment in a private or parochial school. And you have to leave that kid there until now in Rhode Island they graduate from high school. So in earlier decades with industrial economies, children could leave school at 16 with parents' permission. That is no longer the case. Young people have to remain in school and graduate from high school, or be old enough to have graduated, even if they do not graduate. And so that's kind of a one-way street. If we as citizens have to deliver our children to the public schools, then most people assume there's another way on that street, which is that they're going to experience something that would make them able to participate meaningfully in our government as adults. But unfortunately, I think that our pleadings that we filed last week goes soup to nuts through all of the evidence that that is not happening.
All right. We had a really good radio discussion on this last week, and we're having one now. But it dawns on me that I don't think I've asked one of the proper questions here, and that is, what is the connection between the right to the education and the participation in government, as you say? Somebody may get very well educated and say, screw it, I don't want to spend any time participating in the government. What is the actual definition of government participation? And secondly, why the connection to that?
The connection there is because those are the actual things that are in our Constitution that we are expected to participate in and be able to do as citizens of the United States of America.
Like what, voting?
So our enumerated rights. The right to free speech under the First Amendment. So there are plenty of people who may be very well educated and choose not to vote or choose to abstain for various reasons, but they certainly have an expectation that they would be able to come on your show or go onto a street corner and declare why they're not voting this year. That's their First Amendment right. That is constitutionally protected. If they have had no preparation to be able to speak and think well, to read and write, to actually have the skills for analyzing different issues, how are they going to even exercise their First Amendment right to free speech? So start with free speech. And with speech comes assembly and petitioning the government and some things that people might remember from their civics education if they got one, but that are less well known to the public.
So another question is, are you frustrated and looking for a remedy and a clarification from the courts and a constitutional utterance about everybody's right to, if they want to, participate, as you last discussed, in democracy, in the community? Or do you want it to have a specific impact on the function of government? or the political process?
Actually,
Are they intertwined or separable?
most people believe, and the founders, based on all of their writings and utterances, believed that you cannot have a healthy democracy without this necessary element of an educated populace. That is one, it's baked into the logic that went into our Constitution.
So does an educated populace result ipso facto in a more functioning democracy?
I believe, and everyone who's involved with this lawsuit believes, as we believe that the writers of the Constitution held, that with an educated populace you can then have an adequately functioning democracy. I hasten to add, that democracy might go in directions with which I disagree. So it isn't that it would necessarily result in all of my political beliefs playing out, but rather I might be in the minority view on a number of issues, but at least I would know that as young people exit public education and enter adult life, they would be able to participate and perhaps result in things that I disagree with. Okay. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, we should clarify that. When we come back, we'll talk about whether political agendas impact this at all whatsoever. Stay with us. So again, the headline that kind of sponsors our conversation, we've got this litigation. For the timetable, the litigation has been filed. What is the process in the court right now for this lawsuit that efforts to, again, you know what, I'm going to have to write this down 100 times. Give me my bumper sticker again.
Sure.
On how we refer to this thing.
We are asserting that students have a constitutional right to an education that is adequate to prepare them for civic participation as adults.
There you go. You got all that? Good. I think you get it. Timeline. The suit's been filed.
Yeah, now that we've filed it, based on some technical issues, there will be roughly 30 or 60 days before the defendants have to respond to us. And then once they respond, depending on what the nature of their response is, we'll have some opportunity to take this before a judge.
Since we're talking about process, you heard the commissioner's response in general to this at the top of the show, and he's been rather affirming of the concept, it seems to me. Might we have a defendant or a series of defendants and say, Uncle, just tell us what we want to do?
Well,
as opposed to litigating a court case.
Right. That's a very important question, because actually I want to say that many of the defendants in this case are already committed to improving public education. Filing the case against all of the officials in Rhode Island who are responsible for the public education does not mean that we are saying you guys haven't done your job at all. There have been diligent efforts over many years to improve public education in Rhode Island. The question is there a requirement that this happen? And does that requirement include the skills necessary for civic participation? It's not just, there's been this frenzy around testing since the No Child Left Behind Act. And people have been focused in that direction. And we're saying you're missing the biggest part of this picture, which is that young people have to be ready to participate in life more broadly when they leave school. And yes, the test results are concerning. They're alarming. But are we even trying to take stock of whether young people have the skills for civic participation?
All right, since we rolled into that, I'll call an audible here. Eric, can you put up the graphic that shows the bad bars of green and whatever? Yeah, sure. Doesn't matter, whatever. Math or English, we stink at both. So we put them up there, and oh gosh, Dan, you can't say that on TV. Yeah, of course I can. We stink at both. On average, we are not getting the job done. That's the 3rd through 8th grade versus Massachusetts, and here's the math. We got a lot of work to do, and we shouldn't be so critical. I might as well throw this one at you. I don't think you've seen this, but I was asking the commissioner to show some coaches' anger the other day about this. You know, does anybody have it? Here's what happened. There are coaches who believe that you go into the locker room and you hold carrots until you get performance. And then there's Bobby Knight who comes in and throws chairs and tells them the truth. I just want you to throw a chair once.
Yeah.
I just want you to throw a chair once. I want people to understand that this isn't funny, this isn't acceptable, and it's not true that our kids perform.
This isn't funny, this isn't acceptable, and it's not true that our kids can't do it. They can do it.
Be careful what you ask for. I can't take that twice in a week, so hold on to your chair, okay?
There will be no furniture moving today.
So I want to come back then to the political stuff in the next segment, but since we're on this performance and the melding of the concepts of data, the test scores, what I'm asking for, which is some emotion to support the idea that we're mad as hell, that things are not performing, where does this dynamic of RICAS and all of that fit into your conversation? In part, not at all? In a major way? How?
It absolutely fits in because it actually demonstrates the case. What happened in Massachusetts before Massachusetts became one of the leading education systems in the United States? In the 1990s, the Massachusetts education system, floundering as all of the systems around the country have been and were, was sued, and it was asserted that there was a right in the Massachusetts Constitution for children to have an adequate education. Well, guess what happened? They won that case in Massachusetts, and since that case, Massachusetts has had a systematic approach, marching forward with real focus and energy on the project. People metaphorically threw their chairs and said, we are going to reorganize ourselves as a state around excellence in public education.
By the way, that was my expectation. It was completely metaphorical, but even the physical toss was metaphorical in a way.
So that story is very relevant to where we are in Rhode Island.
Okay, so your lawsuit is a federal lawsuit because you want all the states to do so.
Well, I want this to happen in Rhode Island. I've been working on this for 30 years, and I'd like to see it happen. But you're suing in the federal court because the state courts already said no a couple of times. And we believe that it is a federal right, and that as a nation, frankly, we need to have uniformity on this because people move from Rhode Island to Massachusetts, and from Rhode Island to New York, and from New York to Rhode Island. So we are a federal system, and it's a federal constitution. If we win this issue in Rhode Island, it will affect all of the school children in our country, and I'm excited about that, and I think it's necessary.
So what do you think is going to be the proof or the clear articulated outcome of a successful litigation? In other words, okay, you win. Court rules on behalf of the plaintiffs. Orders what? And tangibly and simply, what will we see that's different?
So I've said to everyone who asks me this question, including my family members, if a judge declares that students in the United States have a constitutional right to an education that is adequate to prepare them to participate in democracy, I will wake up the next day in a better America. And that will be a good thing. Then we'll have to get into the nitty-gritty details of how the heck we deliver that. But what will have been answered is this a recommendation? Is this a really great goal, or is this a requirement? And the difference between a requirement and a recommendation is huge in the law.
A requirement, though, comes with criteria.
Absolutely. So how much is enough? And that is a question that would then leave the courthouse and come back into the political and administrative sector of government. And what we would know the next day, after that ruling comes down, the next day in the state of Rhode Island, those who we've sued, who are responsible for administering public education, would be challenged to come up with a new set of frameworks, a new set of systems. We as a state and as a nation would have to roll up our sleeves and organize ourselves around meeting a requirement.
Are you supplying with the lawsuit the systems that you want to see implemented?
Great question, because actually I kind of get annoyed by people who call out problems and never articulate any solutions. I find that to be not a particularly productive exercise. So as part of our commitment to doing this litigation, we have also committed to doing a series of public conversations across this state in our very diverse geographic locales. Even though you can drive across the state in 45 minutes, you got to have a meeting on Aquidneck Island and Woonsocket. You can't just do it in Providence. So over the next year, and this litigation's going to take a little time, we have committed, and working with educational advocacy organizations and community groups, we've committed to holding meetings to say to the general public in Rhode Island, what if we win? What do you expect out of your child's public education? What do you think your kid needs to know in order to go in the voting booth, sit on a jury, and participate in democratic institutions? I think parents have a lot of perspectives on this. I think a lot of parents know what they don't know and what they wish they had known when they left high school. So we're saying bring it on. We want to engage that conversation because a judge sitting in a federal courthouse is not going to give the roadmap for the public education system. A judge can find a right and a requirement. Then in the political and administrative sphere, it's going to be given life.
And then what does the judge do? The judge then orders over a 30, 60, 90, 120-day, 2-year, 5-year period of time that consensus must be the results?
Well, so the way these cases work is that there would be a ruling. We would then go back into the political sphere, and a new commissioner of education, or this commissioner of education, depending on the time frame, because it may take a while, but a commissioner and a governor and legislative leaders would have to organize around that. And if in 3 to 5 years there were no measurable improvements, and we now have this system of measurement, we even have a national test on civics. 23% of American young people are proficient in civics based on that national assessment.
Wow.
23% across all of the school districts, affluent, challenged, and otherwise.
Right.
So we would then go back to the court if it's not happening.
Right. Is there a political agenda? Short answer when we come back. Conversation is fascinating. I only have a minute. You're rumored to be on the left side of the political spectrum, true?
Well, I'm a civil rights lawyer, but our counsel team reflects the entire political spectrum, I can assure you.
People, I'm sure, are about this. But when you say jury and you say vote and you say, you know, the things that are instruments of government that people don't really have a grip on, that is across the political, ideological spectrum, correct?
Absolutely. The fact that people need to participate in democracy, they can tell me I'm wrong all day. I'll be a happy person if there are people who can actively participate and disagree with me.
Yeah. And you make a good point about mommy and daddy. I hope that mommy and daddies across the state begin to realize that they too are pretty challenged about basic civics issues. So again, we can get mired in just the civics, but this conversation keeps weaving out of the big picture and that picture. And it's going to be a fascinating exercise. You're going to have a lot of invitations to the show over the course of the time. Good luck with it.
Thank you so much.
All right, final word when we come back. Important show tomorrow night as well. They're all important, right?